Hello, good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of fair elections. My name is Stefanie Schiffer. I'm the chair of board of the European Platform for Democratic Elections. I'm glad that you attend our discussions on the situation ahead of elections in Georgia. This is the fourth roundtable discussion we hold on elections in Georgia, and it will be devoted to the situation. We have 4 months ahead of the elections. They will take place in October 24. It's 4 weeks after the passing of the foreign agents law through the Georgian parliament, which was end of May, 28th of May this year. It's amidst the EU integration process, which started in, or candidate status was granted in December 2023. And it's some weeks after the passing, or still in the process of amendments of election law through the Georgian parliament. These amendments are passing in quite a controversial way, similar to the passing of a foreign agent law, with overriding vetoes from the president, overriding or ignoring recommendations from ODIHR, Venice commissions. This is critical aspects, and I'm glad that we will have the opportunity to discuss this challenging situation where we are now with our colleagues, friends, experts from Georgia, and all of you. I must say, a first idea was to hold this meeting as an open round table in the Zoom seminar modus, but after getting 100 registration, we understood this will not be feasible, so we have chosen now the form of a webinar. So this means for you, you can address your questions, your comments, your ideas to the experts, but you cannot do it in speaking. We won't see you. Please use for your comments, use the chat. Write your comments in the chat. We will have around half of our time, means 45 minutes more or less, for an open discussion. And another information, we are recording this event, so be aware that things are recorded, and in the second half, please use the comments and the chat. I'm very glad to present you our speakers today. First of all, Nino Dolice. Nino is chair of ISFED, and she's also chair and board member of the European Platform for Democratic Elections. I'm very happy to have you here. Nino, you're not the first director of ISFED with whom we are working, but I'm sure you are the one in the most difficult time since ISFED's existing. EPDE exists since 12 years. ISFED is a founding member of EPDE, and I would say this is the most difficult, most challenging time for elections in Georgia. And we are happy to hear your insight on the situation now. And you will have the first comment. I briefly present also the other speakers. This is Gila, the Georgian Young Lawyers Association, a close partner of ISFED for years also, expert organization also on elections. This is Nana Chanturia, she's an election analyst. We have Sandro Baramidze with us. Very happy to have you here. He's Human Rights and Rule of Law Program Manager at Transparency International, at Transparency Georgia, and he was former First Deputy Minister of Justice in Georgia. Also, I understand you closely worked with Bidzina Ivanishvili in the past, so we are looking forward to your insights of the political and legal situation. And last but not least, we have an expert on the media situation, because media are also affected of these confrontative situation, political situation. It's very important for us to understand the situation. Also, Mamuka Anguladze will inform us about the consequences of the legal proceedings for media in Georgia. Very happy to have you here as our outstanding expert group, and I'm very happy that you are ready to present your views on the actual political situation and also to answer the questions of our international auditory, which consists of election experts, human rights experts, and representatives of international institutions. Thank you for that. So the first word, please, Nino, we are looking forward to hear your assessment on the general civil society, social and political situation today in Georgia.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everybody. I'm really very happy and honored to be here today to speak about Georgia's elections. And also, I'm very happy to have this high interest towards Georgia's elections, which is very much important for us. Yeah, I will try to briefly talk about the current situation, and then if there are questions, I think it will be very interesting to listen to the questions. So let's start from the importance of these elections to Georgia. These elections, we always say that these elections are important, but these elections, the parliamentary elections, which will be held in October 26, is really crucial for Georgia's democratic and European development for several reasons. And I would like to explain why. First of all, it is because these elections will be first time under the candidate status Georgia got recently. And whenever European Union gave us candidate status, they also gave us 9 steps to be implemented for further going towards European Union. And one of them is conducting free, fair, and competitive elections. So these elections and the quality of elections will very much define how Georgia will progress in terms of EU integration. That's why it's very much important. Second one, it's because this is first time fully proportional election system in Georgia, and previously we had mixed system with proportional but also majoritarian systems. And this first time fully proportional systems gives opportunity to voters to be better represented in country's legislative body, and it can also support pluralism in the country. And the third, which is also very much important and huge novelty for the country, this is that Georgia will conduct these elections through electronic technologies, which is huge novelty also for the country, and almost 90% of voters will vote on election day through these electronic technologies. And it's very much important how technologies will work, but also how election administration will be prepared and how voter information will be conducted. Because when you have this scale novelty, of course, voter information is crucial. We just had our first assessment report 2 days ago, and I would like to underline what's the current situation. First of all, Georgia's pre-election period can be already said that was damaged by the so-called Russian law, which was introduced several weeks ago. And we know that this legislation was firstly introduced last year, and then it was withdrawn, but this time it was adopted with 2 months non-stop protests of Georgian people, and with the recommendations, serious critics of our international partners. But unfortunately, government of Georgia did not listen neither to the people of Georgia and to our international partners, who was very openly saying that this legislation will damage Georgia's EU integration and aspiration, and legislation was adopted. This legislation is labeling all civil society organizations and media who is funded by our international partners as an organizations representing foreign countries' interests. And of course, this legislation is against Georgian civil society organizations' dignity, because we have been working here, and ISPED was created in 1995 to serve only Georgia's interests and to support Georgia's free and fair elections. So we have openly said with many other organizations that we are not going to register under this legislation, which is against Georgia's constitution, against Georgia's EU integration, and again, labeling us as a foreign interest or foreign agent, which means that this legislation will create problem to all civil society organizations and media, but it will have more effect and immediate effect on election observers, because it is entering into the force right before elections, and it allows Georgian government's Ministry of Justice, in case we do not register, to start monitoring themselves and also issuing penalties which will, of course, create lots of problems for us in September and October, right before elections. We still do not know what kind of bylaws government is going to develop and what can be exact procedures. But again, for example, we have heard from the mayor of Tbilisi that they're saying that we can freeze accounts, etc. So, I mean, we still do not know what kind of developments exactly it will have, but we can surely say that it will affect negatively on election observers here on the ground. The second problem and second political context is that first time during our independence, we have been hearing that our foreign policy trajectory was questioned by the government of Georgia. We had ups and downs in terms of democratic development or backsliding, but in Georgia, there was no doubt about country's foreign trajectory going towards Western integration, Euro-Atlantic integration. And first time we heard these doubts, even from the founder of the ruling party, Bidzina Ivanishvili, when he came out on April 29 on the pro-government rally. So this is also a big issue. Third one can be electoral amendments. EU was very open in its 9 steps, saying that EU is waiting from Georgia to implement democratic reforms, including considering OSCE or the recommendations and reports in terms of electoral reforms. Unfortunately, we haven't seen like comprehensive, inclusive electoral reform, but rather we have seen some amendments which was not discussed with civil society organizations. It was done in a rushed manner, and unfortunately, it was again backsliding even in terms of election legislation. And one of them can be considered, for example, composition of election administration, OSCE, ODIHR, Venice Commission, as well as Georgian civil society organizations have been asking for more consensus-based choosing a Central Election Commission chairperson and the members. But unfortunately, government and ruling party Parliament of Georgia made amendments in the legislation, giving opportunity on the ruling party to present candidates and to choose as well with simple majority, and excluding, for example, president's role in creating selection commission, etc. We had, for example, another amendment recently, which was overrode veto of the president about, for example, decreasing the decisions of the Central Election Commission with simple majority, while previously it was 2/3, which was also very important in order to have consensus-based discussions within the election administration, which is composed of professional but also political party members. So these are some of the amendments which was done in a rushed manner, and it was not consulted with civil society organizations, and it was not inclusive process considering OSCE or the recommendations. One thing I already mentioned, we will have fully proportional system, and it's very good because we have been advocating for a long time for that. But again, we have 5% threshold, which in Georgia's context can be considered as a relatively high. And we had agreement 3 years ago to decrease it to 2%. But unfortunately, it was not done. And also, like taking into the consideration that electoral blocks are prohibited for these elections, and then there is 5% threshold. Now it is giving situation that there are discussions within political parties how to unify their efforts in order to overcome this 5% threshold. Because if not, then all these votes will be lost, which of course will never negatively affect on the people's representation. So there are some of the other steps in terms of electoral reforms, for example, abolishing gender quotas, which was considered a step forward for the women's representation. Also, there is another legislation introduced about LGBT rights, which also very negative steps. And we have been saying that all these anti-democratic steps also are damaging pre-election environment. And lastly, I will say that besides electoral legislation and political context, we have already seen political campaigning starting, but mostly from the ruling party and not opposition yet. As for the ruling party, we are always saying that biggest challenge in Georgia is the line between ruling party and the government. during use of administrative resources, and this has been long-standing recommendation that there should be line which is blurred in Georgia between the government and the ruling party, but we are already seeing some of the electorally motivated programs or social projects which is done right before elections, for example, rising salaries and some of the benefits to people, and we call it electorally motivated and use of administrative resources because it is not putting all electoral subjects in an equal position. About media, my colleagues will say, but media environment is also deteriorating in the country, and also we are looking at social media, which is increasing in terms of receiving information about politics and elections in general. And in social media, we are seeing lots of disinformation and propaganda narratives, including against EU, against the West, and we are waiting that there will be lots of disinformation and propaganda about election as well. And we are worried because we have already seen some of their pro-Russian interference and attempts of interference in Georgia's information space about elections. And it will be very much important to defend Georgian voters from Russian disinformation and propaganda related to elections in upcoming months. Just to sum up, situation is really difficult, especially, as I said, for civil society organizations. We still do not know what kind of developments there might be, and future is still vague. But of course, our goal is to defend Georgian voters' rights, and we are planning to do, and we already started full-scale election monitoring mission. We already started pre-election observation in all municipalities and districts of Georgia from June 1st. Our goal is to have around 1,500 observers during election day. And of course, we are going to use all the electoral dispute resolution if we find any problematic areas in elections. And of course, we really want to see how electoral technologies will work and to defend Georgian voters. This is very shortly. I know that I do not have much time, and then I am ready to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, so much. This is a very comprehensive, a good oversight, and we can only applaud you and support you in your really strong and decisive and consequent fight against this foreign agent law, which is duly called Russian law in Georgia. This is not just a bad idea. It's a very precise understanding of what this law would mean. And we know and we remember in 2012 when the foreign agents law was passed in the Russian Federation, the election observation, the independent election observation Golos was the first to be targeted. And it is a law to close down, to shut down independent election observation. And that's why we very much support you, Nino, and your whole organization in your outspoken fight against this law. We understand and wish you really good success in this law, which is against all international definitions and agreements. EPDE has published a statement, quite a clear statement, which was signed by more than almost 70 international NGOs in support of ISFED in this important fight. You also mentioned the pre-election situation with the new laws. This is the topic where we go a bit deeper now with the help of Nana. Chantoya, you will introduce us into the question, what will the application, the implementation of these new laws, what will that mean for the election process, which starts now, and for the elections in October? How will that influence the election? Nana, the floor is yours.
First of all, greetings to all participants, and thank you for organizing this important discussion ahead of the upcoming elections in Georgia. These elections will indeed shape the future of our country, and we expect these elections to be the most tense ever. Because of this background situation, as Nino mentioned, created by high polarization and foreign agents law, which we believe should be seen as part of electoral process and not as a separate law, coupled with these questionable amendments also Nino mentioned, adopted by the ruling party. So Overall, international good practice highlights the importance of the stability of electoral legislation and the impact that frequent changes can have on public trust. Any changes to electoral legislation should be adopted by broad consensus with involvement of all stakeholders like opposition, civil society, which did not happen in this case. And we believe that this new electoral rules is seen as intended more to favor the ruling party in upcoming elections than to improve the electoral system. So I will briefly describe these problematic amendments that we consider are matter of concern. So a few days ago, legal committee overrode the president's veto of amendments which lowering the quorum for decision making in the Central Election Commission, and this excludes the uh, this excludes the opposition from participating in decision making and raise concerns about increased influence of the ruling party on the election administration. Under these amendments, if the CEC fails to reach a decision with 12 members, overall there are 17 members, the issue can be voted on again at the same session, and then 9 votes will be enough. As a result, the vote of only 8 professional members and 1 representative of the ruling party will be enough to make a decision. And these resolutions carry legal weight and regulate critical issues under the electoral code. So I attended this legal committee hearing, and the ruling party's position is that this change was necessary as an anti-deadlock measure in case of opposition boycotts of CEC meetings. However, there is no precedent under the old rules where such deadlock occurred due to the opposition non-participation. And also something we should take into account is that this comes after amendments according to which instead of the president, which is more neutral institution, the Speaker of the Parliament nominates the chairman and professional members of the CEC for election. And if the parliamentary majority fails to elect these members and simple majority is enough, and also if the simple majority fails, which is less likely to happen, then president will make final decision. So the new chairman of the CEC and some professional members were already elected by only simple majority for 5 years. So these people elected by the lower consensus will not need the opposition's involvement to make decisions that may affect the upcoming elections. Also, as Nino mentioned, in the major setback for women's political participation, the Georgian parliament recently abolished mandatory gender quotas for political parties. And gender quotas were part of the European Commission's 12 points that they considered to be fulfilled and met, and they grant us candidate status. So overall, the adoption of such amendments, while some of the important recommendations of international organizations remain unaddressed, is matter of concern for us. Also, briefly regarding this foreign agents law, like many other organizations, Gaila is boycotting this law because we believe it undermines our democratic principles, and we prefer to pay the fine, which is 25,000 lari, than register as foreign agents. But because not doing so, we may face major challenges, as Nino mentioned. The organizations which are not able to pay the fine for non-registration, their accounts could be frozen, So this will prevent them from working and funding projects, which some of them may be also related to the elections, like election observation missions. And maybe in the end, these organizations will be forced to register as foreign agents. So another threat in this is the damage of reputation we are facing by they are labeling us as foreign agents, and they are already graffiti on the building of our organization. We believe ordered by certain individuals, which say agents, slaves, traitors of the countries, as well as there are some insulting paintings, which is actually depressing for the employees who are working to strengthen democratic institutions and human rights, protecting human rights for years on minimum wages. So these people don't deserve this kind of attitude, but certain individuals trying to mislead society about our work. And lastly, now what is happening in Hungary, Orban's government has launched an investigation into the local branch of TI, accusing it of receiving foreign funds to influence voters' decisions. So we are concerned that similar threats could be made against us with investigations based on these accusations, and we don't feel safe in this regard either. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nana, for these explanations, both to the legal legal amendments to the election law and also to the implications of the foreign agent law. Thank you very much. We already have the first questions in the chat. I propose we go further and collect all these questions then after your inputs. Thank you, Nana, so much. Sandro Baramidze. The question to you is, as representing the Transparency International Georgia, a very important point, question, challenge for transparency is the financial accountability during the election campaign. We would be very much interested to hear your assessment of that, as it is the situation now in Georgia, also how the new election law would affect the regulations. And also feel please free also to comment on the other legal amendments to the electoral law that have been done.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Let me start with what we are going to do in the wake of the adoption of the Russian law. There are certain legal avenues which we want to apply. First of all, we can and will file a constitutional complaint with the Constitutional Court of Georgia, invoking a number of constitutional articles which are about the protection of basic human rights. The Russian law comes into conflict with a number of human rights and liberties, such as freedom of association, freedom of expression, a prohibition of discrimination, equality before the law, right to privacy, and the like. And we think that we will have very good arguments to request the Constitutional Court to repeal the law. However, problem is here that Constitutional Court is pretty slow in coming back with its decisions, but there is an interim measure available at the Constitutional Court. The complainant may request the court to suspend the law pending the final decision of the Constitutional Court, and we will apply this too. Also, Georgia, as a party to the European Convention on Human Rights, we citizens of Georgia can also apply to the European Court of Human Rights, and with the request to find the violations of the basic human rights and liberties, which I already mentioned, and also the interim measure by which the European Court may request indicate to the government of Georgia to refrain from the enforcement of the Russian law is also available, which we also will apply. Now, regarding the key issue which I'm called here to talk about, and which is one of the key directions the Transparency International usually works in terms of election, is the monitoring of the political party funding and also election campaign funding. So far we have the data for the entire year 2023, and also in particular the last quarter of year 2023. And all this data for those periods show that there is a huge difference in the party funding and spending between the ruling party on the one hand and all the other parties on the other hand. For example, in the last quarter of 2023, Georgian Dream, the ruling party, was able to raise 9.5 million lari from individual donors. By comparison, all the other parties raised just 700,000 lari. In other words, the donations contributed to the ruling party by 13 times are greater than those donated to the all other parties taken in aggregate. Now the question is how the ruling party manages to achieve such a huge difference. After all, the polls say that the ruling party, yes, is leading in the polls. It is ahead of other parties, but there is not such a big difference between the supporters of the election of the ruling party and all other parties. The answer is very simple. The ruling party applies very different manipulations by which it encourages the companies, private companies, to contribute donations to the ruling party and to refrain, on the other hand, from donating to the other opposition parties. One of the biggest leverages how to make companies donate for the ruling party is public tenders. The point of the matter is that over the last quarter of 2023, the physical persons who donated for the ruling party were associated somehow with employees or managers, or in other ways associated with the companies who won during last 3 months of 2023, 200 million laris in public tenders. And the same companies, based on those 200 million laris, donated to the ruling party 1.7 billion laris from 2023 to 2023. 2013 to 2023. During the 2023, the companies who won public tenders worth in aggregate 1.1 billion laris, donated for the benefit of the ruling party 1.45 million laris. What does this scheme talk about? It says that the government awards huge monetary funds on specifically picked out companies associated with the ruling party members, and then the monies raised by those companies by public tenders are given back to the ruling party as a contribution of their physical, employees. That is the point of the matter. The other manipulation and other, irregularity that is applied in the course of donations for the benefit of ruling party is that in the Georgian law, under the Georgian law, corporate donations are prohibited. Although this rule is rather new, rather recent, still it exists. And the question is, who are the natural persons, who are the individuals which donate to the ruling party? All of them are associated with the tender winning companies. In other words, individuals are used as a camouflage of corporate donations. Corporations distribute monies to their employees to make an impression that it is employees rather than companies who then donate to the ruling party. But there are some indications why all those individual donations is a fiction and is just a, fictitious donation. The point of the matter is that among individual donations, there are persons with rather, regular, not managerial employees, someone like an engineer, someone like a geologist, and so on. And all of a sudden, it appears that engineer and geologists contribute to the ruling party 60,000 lari. How can those people afford such amount of money? It is very, questionable whether they earn that amount of money during a year. In other words, it is clear that they are just fictitious donors and not real ones. Also, the other direction that Transparency International traditionally reports with respect to political campaign is the misuse of administrative resources. And here in Georgia, we have very bad experience, and all governments who come and go usually use administrative resources, abuse administrative resources for their own benefit and to the detriment of opposition parties. And this misuse of administrative resources is not limited only to the use of administrative buildings as a campaign building, as using the vehicles of administrative staff as a means of transportation during campaign. These things are irregular, these things are unlawful, but they are rather minor violations compared to the other major ones. And about the major ones, as Nino mentioned, ISFED and us, Transparency International, have already reported couple of years ago when we, based on the whistleblower, this whistleblower was a top security officer or former deputy head of the State Security Service, who is now in prison. But he, reported about the malpractices that the ruling party usually uses during the elections. Those malpractices include intimidation of voters and also bribing them, also using certain administrative leverages, something like lifting probation sanctions from the probationary, subjects to probation for the reason of mobilizing them to intimidate regular voters, using some certain criminals and street thugs to intimidate voters. All of this all of these practices were reported by the whistleblower himself, and then all those facts were summed up by two of our NGOs, ISFED and Transparency International. What has happened since then? Actually nothing. The criminal law authorities have reported that they have started investigation, but there is no single occasion and single fact over more than 3 years that any of the administrative personnel who was involved in such unlawful practices was convicted or even charged with the crimes. This is the situation with the usual situation with the election campaigns, and this particular campaign is not an exception. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandro, for this clear information, also with figures, with research, and on this I think one can call it a mixture between campaign financing and corruption mechanisms. And also the very important and difficult to investigate the whole question of misuse of administrative resources, which is a huge topic for election observation, to be clear and on that, and to have good methods on researching the misuse of administrative resources. Thank you, Sandro. Now we come to the media part, which is a question which concerns, I would say, I guess, everybody in the room, in this online room. Each single country is affected by misuse of social platforms, misuse of freedom of expression, misuse of media sphere. And it is so important to get insight into that, how you tackle that challenge in Georgia. But also we have questions to Mamuka and Guladze from the Media Advocacy Coalition. How does the foreign agent law affect you as media professionals? I think these two aspects of the discussion would be interesting for us to hear from you.
Thank you very much. And first of all, of course, I also join to my colleagues with whom I agree with the assessment. Thank you for organizing this event, and once again underlying the importance of the media, especially ahead of elections and the crucial elections this year, and plus the challenges as the media outlets, including both traditional new ones, are facing these days. So this Russian law equally affects not only to the civil society organizations, but also media outlets. But even before, like in other countries which are adopted the Russian law or attempted to adopt, it was accompanied even before that the attacks on media, which usually plays a key role in any democratic society, and the threats they're facing and the conditions in which they're working, always indicating the level of democracy, how open is the society, and etc. Media environment is, before the Russian law, was in critical conditions, but even after that, the situation became even more difficult. Physical and verbal threats and harassment attacks against the media outlets unfortunately became part of the daily job of the journalists, especially those who are representing independent and critical editorial policies. And from the side of the government, not effective investigation further encourages the violence and creates impunity amongst the alleged perpetrators and a self-censorship environment. Smear campaign, it's not only the assessment of our very good colleagues, the local organizations, but also Meta also last year published a report indicating that a person who is affiliated with a government stratcom was involved in the disseminating anti-Western narratives, and during the first round of the protest against the Russian law. Considering that the smear campaign targets especially not only political opponents, but critical media outlets, individuals, stations, and anyone who dares to speak publicly and oppose the government politics, slaps strategic litigation against the public participation as a relatively new challenge the media outlets facing. And given the level of state capture we're facing these days, of course, additionally creates very serious questions how the Russian law would be implemented. Given the fact that there is no, need to adopt this kind of law in any democratic society, and quite rightfully, this law has been described as a Russian law, based on the experience and dynamic of the adoption and implementation of the law, which we see in a country which is occupying Georgia, part of the Georgian territory. First of all, it's about the challenges for the media outlets, along with the civil society organizations, but since I speak mostly about the media outlets, stigmatization, and change the term like from agent to the person under influence in the Georgian reality do not change significantly, because both of them having definitely negative association and impact, and being independent, impartial, and being called like agent or like an organization under foreign influence definitely creates a stigmatization and creates very difficult, even not possible environment for working. Disproportional sanctions foreseen by the law, even if the media outlets and along with the civil society organizations, as my colleagues mentioned, publicly stated on a number of occasions that they're not going to be registered, considering that this law is unconstitutional. It's against the European values and standards, but it's the law still forcing you to be registered. So you are refusing to be registered and even ready to pay the fines, which are totally disproportional. Last but not least, this is as a possibility from the government to access to all kinds of information. And as it's correctly mentioned in our assessment, of Venice Commission and other organizations, between second and third readings, somehow like secretly in a secret environment has been added this possibility to like sanctioning of individuals, individual persons, and in case of refusing to provide information. And being a media, when the sources, colleagues, or anyone who cooperates directly or indirectly with media outlets knows that as a government authorities can anytime, not anytime, but considering like how the law will be implemented, requires access to all kinds of information. Of course, people, sources, whistleblowers will refrain from cooperating with the media outlets. So this is a reality, and this is a challenges, and about those challenges and the threats have been actively reported and covered by the media outlets. The media outlets played a very key role, among others, to inform the general public. They faced a number of challenges these days. First of all, they are directly impacted by the law. Then they have to report and inform the general public what's going on, and plus the colleagues and the international community to keep informed about the development. And plus, they also like the all ordinary citizens who permanently organize and participate in the rallies. They're also used to participating in the rallies as ordinary citizens. The media outlets during the rallies will also target also verbal violence, and they have also be restricted to conduct the work. And boycott from the side of the ruling party exists for several years, so they're not giving the interviews as they're giving it away to the programmed media outlets. And the programmed media outlets are not anymore like only biased or like trying to hide some argument or like to report from different angles. So this kind of way of manipulation, and they became now a true propaganda media outlets, and now the stage of deteriorating the situation. The media outlets having different legal regulation in the country. So online media outlets having different stations. And these days they also joined to the public statement saying that they're not going to register, but they're about to continue reporting, and especially ahead of the elections, pre-election campaign, because election day is of course important, but I mean, the outcome of election derives not only from the election day, but before the election, and when there are official period for pre-election campaign, even before. As I say, it's quite a normal reality in other countries, and especially these days, given that, and my colleagues outlined about the number of challenges, abuse of the administrative resources, etc. These days, the government has not practically started implementing this law, but the smear campaigns, the threatening calls, and etc., the media outlets are also receiving. But the mood of the media outlets, especially those who are independent, critical, and etc., they are going to report to inform the general public, because elections are crucial, and the people should have like citizens should be informed in order to make informed decisions. This is quite briefly about the challenges the media outlets were facing before the Russian law has been adopted, and this is this kind of the least of the challenges they are used to face, unfortunately, are very large. And after that, when the Russian law has been adopted, the situation became definitely even more dangerous, and they're of course facing the existential threat. However, as their readiness and the spirit they're displaying and publicly stating on a number of occasions gives me the quite good hopes that they're ready to continue with the work. Even so, the threats they're facing are quite serious and very critical. In case of the questions, of course, I'm more than happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mamuka, for this explanation. And as we observe from other countries where Russia, mostly where this law has been passed, we understand that often this law is taken like an angle, and those who are declared foreign agents then will follow subsequent restrictions. And therefore, this is also this big danger of singling out certain organizations and then hindering them in participating in political and social life in general. So this would affect also the media. So thank you very much for your introduction. Now we come to the open discussion. We have very interesting questions, which was not to be expected differently, because we have an outstanding expert community here. There are two questions concerning election observation. I would give them directly to Nino. One is the question how you see the opportunity for international election observation. How do you foresee the possibilities for international observers to attend and/or organize election observation missions? This, I think, goes to Nino. And a second question is also interesting, taking into account the oppression of public and political opposition. Would you expect that the Georgian people to be more reluctant to participate in domestic election observation, or actually be more motivated to participate in local observation at polling stations? I think these questions go directly to Nino.
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. First, I will start from the internationals. For now, we cannot say that this legislation directly affects international election observation groups. So for now, we think that international observers will be allowed to enter the country and observe elections. We know that, for example, OSCE was invited to be election observer like a few months ago. So I think now the target is more domestic election observation, at least with the legislation and the narratives what we are hearing from the ruling party. So I think that currently there is no threat for the internationals, but of course you cannot exclude anything in the future. As for the questions related to domestic mission and how people will participate, and then there was another question related to that. So right now, so many people are calling, writing to us how they can participate in defending elections in general. We even could not imagine, because, okay, we always had volunteers, but right now so many people are calling and asking, and we have opened early for this time our election observation database. You know, usually we do it closer to elections, and we already opened it. So I think that many people will be interested to volunteer for us or other election observer group to take part, whether as an election observer, or some have even asked to participate, for example, in the office and help us with their statement writing, translating, etc. So people really want to somehow, you know, help the process and volunteer for us. And then there was a question, one of them was asking, they have already registered as an ISVED observer, and when we will like call them. It's very important to have election-related training not very early and closer to elections, because that all relevant amendments to the election code should be already introduced. And also, you know, it's very much important to be closer to elections to remember all the instructions we will be doing. So we are going to have trainings from August and September, and we will contact you during these times, most probably from August, because yeah, again, it's very much important to be closer to elections, to have all this memory, whatever we will be delivering these trainings. And I hope that we will have many observers this time again, because we see this interest in people to defend Georgia's election. Those people who were standing on the protests, now they want to defend Georgia's elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Nino. This is encouraging. Good news. Also, we would not have expected differently from the Georgian people, whom we have seen already so brave and so active in the weeks before. This is a very, very good news, and it's very good to have you and your colleagues on place who are absolutely capable and ready to provide Georgian citizens with everything they need to know on election observation. This is a super good news. I would now give a next question to Sandro. Sandro, you mentioned the idea of addressing the European Court of Human Rights, and this is the question here in the chat. How can the European Court of Human Rights cancel or terminate the foreign influence law in Georgia? What is the legal basis under the convention? Could you explain on that, please?
Sure. Well, under the rules of the court of the European Court of Human Rights, there is a rule number 39, which says that any applicant, if there is an imminent risk of having irreparable damage from the violations of convention articles, if that irreparable damage is imminent, then any applicant can apply to the European Court to apply an interim measure, which means to indicate to the government to refrain from certain action. These interim measures usually are applied mostly in the cases of extradition or deportation, and in such instances when a person to be deported or extradited faces the threat of torture or capital punishment or so on. But there are also some precedent cases where European Court has applied interim measure when democracy is at stake. This was the situation, for example, in Rustavitu case, when the European Court indicated to the government of Georgia to refrain from the enforcement of the res judicata judgment of the Supreme Court. This was the situation in the Novaya Gazeta case, when just recently, it was just 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, when European Court indicated to the Russian government to refrain from taking any measure which would lead to the closure of Novaya Gazeta. And there are some other more cases too. And again, compared to the extradition cases, the number of such precedent cases are, of course, small, but still there exist such cases when democracy is at stake. You can apply, and Strasbourg Court may come back with the interim measure.
Thank you very much, Sandro, for that information. There is another question I would directly give already to you, as you also mentioned the misuse of administrative resources. This question is the commonly known practice of having a number of persons on the payroll of municipalities, etc., who are not actually working there. How big is the problem? Question is clear. Yeah, getting engaged in the electoral campaigns.
This has been a huge problem in Georgia. This problem existed before the Georgian Dream government, and this case is even, this problem has even been ramped up under the Georgian Dream government. I'm not ready to give you specific numbers, how many fictitious NGOs have been, or other, organizations have been established by municipalities or even central government bodies where people work, and those people are simple, supporters of the Georgian Dream. They know nothing. They have no skills. They actually do nothing other than being involved in the campaigning for the Georgian Dream or against the opposition parties, or even are engaged in the violent attacks. We have such examples as well. For example, you know that there were, mass protests against the Russian law during the process when this law was being considered in the parliament. And almost every night there were mass protests, and in one of the protesters, in one of the rallies which took part in the Hero Square in downtown Tbilisi, when the protesters blocked the, very important, subjunction of the various central roads in Tbilisi. The police tried to stop this rally by arresting the protesters, but they failed to do. Protesters continued blockage of the ways. But later on, certain people, strangers, attacked one or two protesters who, stood with their families, in one of the peripheral areas of the meeting, of the rally, and they were severely beaten up, and street cameras, surveillance cameras spotted them, and those persons were identified at the free media. And it turned out that the attackers were sportsmen who were employed by one of the NGO, quote unquote NGO, established by Tbilisi mayor's office. So we have such incidents as well.
Thank you very much. This is a big seduction, misuse of administrative resources, where we find what we find in several countries, including in EU member states. And it's important to have these techniques in place to detect them. And in the European Parliament also, we have the same problems. And when it's possible to detect and to find out. In this case, what you mentioned is a very, very rude one. But also, if it's less brutal, it is possible to identify the authors of certain actions. And if you can attach them to a certain office, publicly paid, then this is possible to be detected. This is very good practice. Thank you for this clarification, Sandro. Now we have a very early question, which is very interesting. And finally, I come to it. Thank you for your patience. The question is about voting technologies. And I read it for everybody. Technologies in the upcoming elections. Can you elaborate in general and more precisely which part of a voting day will be done through technology and which will remain analog? Will voters be casting their ballots still on paper? What challenges does this change technology pose to Georgian domestic and citizens observer organizations in monitoring the election day, and in particular the tabulation and determination of the results? We have election experts in the group. So maybe Nana, would you want to start with an answer, and then I would pass for more detailed answer to Nino? Would that be fine? You will start, Nana, and Nino will go more in detail then.
Okay. For general information, there will be more than 90% of precincts which will vote in this way. So the procedures of registration when voters arrive to the electoral precincts, and for pollings, counting of votes, and drawing up of summary protocols of the polling results will be carried in this way. It will be carried out in this way. And the exceptional precincts which will not vote in this way will be precincts established in another states, and also the places which are in remote regions, like which are hard to access. For the challenges, since 2018, Georgia had tested this technology 8 times, but main test is ahead because now it will be large scale. In the past, there were some midterm elections on the few precincts where they used this technology, but then it was implemented well. But now it's really large scale, and we will see more challenges in practice. But also at this point, we have monitors in different Georgian regions, and they are giving us a valuable situation about local situations. And I asked them to research some public opinion about how they consider what is this electronic elections. And despite CC is trying to raise awareness, there's some commercials in the TVs. They have some stations in where is the public transport, etc. So people are still confused, and some of them think that they should vote online. Some of them think that these electronic machines are not trustworthy because they can be hacked. So there is challenge and still work to do to raise the awareness about electronic technologies in elections, and our organization trying to do so. We had some report in this regard. We are engaging with public and local communities, having meetings and trying to explain them that actually this kind of elections are better. But main challenges we will see in practice. But in theory, it looks good at this point.
Thank you, Nana. So maybe Nino, you could accomplish. Yeah. How do you prepare for these new electronic voting elements?
Yeah. First I will also make clear that it's not electronic voting. Like, people still do not have understanding what it is. It is electronic technologies in elections, but we still have paper ballot for using. We have two types of technology. One is voter verification, where instead of voters list, which was printed, now we will have planchets, and commission members will check voters through the IDs with this planchette. So this one became voter verification for the technologies. So then again, we have still paper ballot, but people, instead of putting it in the box, they will scan it now. And at the end of the day, the machine will have preliminary results based on this scanning, and it will give the receipt. But with OSCE ODIHR recommendations, which was considered, after having preliminary results, which is receipt, we will still have manual recount according to the legislation. So these results through technology is preliminary but not official, and official result will be manually recounted ballot papers, and the final protocol which will be issued on a polling station based on this manual recount, which is good, I would say, and we positively assess, because when you have so big novelty, like more than 70% of the polling station and 90% of voters will vote through these new technologies, it's very much important to somehow you can check the results. And also generally, we all know that the OSCE ODIHR recommend, like general assessment is that first you should trust the election administration, and I mean, electronic technologies itself doesn't bring trust. You should have first trust, and then you should introduce electronic technologies. So right now we can say that it can decrease some technical errors, human errors, but at the end of the day, I think many things are dependent about the independence of election administration and impartiality and good work of the polling station and commission members. This will be very much important because, again, if you want to manipulate, you can do if commissions are not independent and impartial. But it can really improve some of the technical errors, what we had in previous elections, if there will be good feel from the election administration. The biggest challenge or question for the people is secrecy of the vote, because secrecy of the vote in Georgia is quite a big problem. People are still thinking that commission can know who they voted for, and this is also used for threatening people. And we should have a big campaign on that vote secrecy is guaranteed with this new technology, because, you know, people maybe in rural areas can be still thinking that I am scanning my vote and somebody can really see it. So this will be very much important. We have observed by elections 2 times last year, and we did not see big problems, to be honest, right now. But it was only kind of one party non-competitive elections, so you cannot really compare to the one which will be right now. And also one thing what we are worried about is that election administration increased number of voters per polling stations. If previously it was 1,500, now there will be 3,000 voters. So if polling stations will be allowed and they can have all these 3,000 people, and there will be no lines or problems during the election day. The magnitude will be very high, competitive, and tense elections in general. Let's see, we are preparing ourselves for election day observation, as well as looking how Central Election Commission did like all this procurement process, how the company, it's mathematics, how the company works and how it is the provider, how it will be like all techniques used and programming and everything. And also, it's also very much important how transparent all these procedures will be. So one is election day procedures on the polling station, but second one is at the central level, how all this will take place, how transparent it will be, and what audit will say later, because, you know, it needs audit, special audit after elections are done. We are preparing ourselves, updating methodology, and let's see, we will issue our statements and reports about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nino, for this Nana, for this comprehensive answer. It is an important topic, important question. It is as it is affecting both administration and also observation of elections more and more. And each country develops several tools, several aspects of parts of the election process are affected by the electronic simplification, or so I think this could be really a topic we should stick to and continue observing. Maybe it will be a topic of another Zoom discussion closer to the election day. So now we come to the final question, which was indeed the first question. I just put we are a little bit ahead. This is about the FARA. How can we compare? Can we compare the foreign agent law to this US? I think it was mentioned 1939 in US. There was also an anti-foreign agent law, FARA. What are the differences? Question double standards. This discussion we remember from the time the law was taken in the Russian Federation. It is important to be clear on that. So I see Sandro would answer, also Nino would answer. Maybe this time we start with Sandro, and Nino, you will again accomplish if there is some points open. Sandro first.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was one of the key arguments of the ruling party when they introduced this Russian law, and when this law was considered in parliament, their speakers and I mean ordinary members would always say that you know what you want from us, we are doing the same thing what Americans did in their country by adopting I mean FARA, and also some other countries, Australia, Israel, and so on, did the same thing, and France has also adopted such a law, and even European, I mean EU is also considering its own law. So we are doing the same thing as democracies have already done, and this is not true. And the Venice Commission, by the way, very specifically, very in detail, described why the Georgian Dream Russian law cannot be compared with FARA. And in its decision, which was adopted in late May, and now the plenary session of Venice Commission also endorsed this urgent opinion just a couple of days ago. Any interested person can see how Venice Commission explains why it's not comparable with FARA. And one of the key issues is there that FARA is not designed to silence NGOs and free media. It is somehow related with the lobbyist operations. It's somehow related with the lobbyism, and also it somehow is related with the political activities. In Georgian law, anyone, just because the organization receives more than 20% of its annual budget from foreign sources, just because of that one only criterion is considered as an organization pursuing the interest of a foreign power. In other words, there is no other criteria which FARA, for example, lays down, or other laws, similar laws in democratic countries also lay down. Nothing of this kind is laid down here in this Russian law. And the other factor which I would also mention is that FARA provides a huge judicial review for, US Department of Justice against, in protection of anyone and against the Department of Justice. If Department of Justice cannot automatically register someone or cannot automatically fine someone or use any other sanctions against someone, but instead Department of Justice has to prove before the American courts that its decisions are in compliance with the US law, Constitution and US law. That's a huge difference. Here we have different, just quite vice versa. Here, Ministry of Justice simply registers you, simply fines you, and if you want to go to the courts, go ahead and go to the courts for the rest of your life. I mean, contest this in the courts, which Georgian courts are far from being American courts in terms of quality of justice. And even if you go and appeal, the law specifically says that the fact of appeal does not stop the Ministry of Justice decisions from its operation for its enforcement.
Yeah, thank you. And Nino, is there something you would add at that point?
Not really. I think Sandra was very clear, and all what's happening right now is not like really comparing, but it's used for the propaganda machine. That is the similar, and we have seen very similar copy-paste like narratives from our government. Unfortunately, with Vladimir Putin saying the same during 2012 introduction of this Russian law in Russia at the time. So it's mostly used for the propaganda, and we all know, and those citizens who are supporting us and who are against this Russian law really understand what's the difference between the legislation. So I think now there is clear sides, and whoever doesn't want to really change their mind, they will not, no matter how you will explain everything. They have been using word transparency, you know, for this propaganda machine because it's really working. But yeah, I think for the people now it's everything clear. Otherwise, Sandra explained how different it is, and I do not want to add much on that.
Great. Okay, so only Mamuka was left without question, but this is due to the character of this election discussion. So I'm sure another time you will be able to explore more. But thank you to all participants, also to Mamuka, to everybody, Sandro, Nino, Nina. Nina. Thank you very much, Nana. Nino, sorry. Thank you very much for these insightful contributions. I just want to attract your attention to the report ISFED is going to has already published on the ISFED website. You will find it in the webinar chat. The report Nino has mentioned is I think is in Georgian language, and English translation will be available soon. Don't forget to see that report. And I will close with final words from Peter Novotny, who wrote in the chat, fingers crossed for a legal battle against the Russian law that threatens Georgian NGOs, media, and democracy. Fingers crossed, as much as we can, we support you, we are with you, and we know you are strong, we are active, you are smart, and we are sure you make the very best out of this situation. We'll fight that law. So thank you to everybody. I'm sure we meet again before the elections, at least here in Zoom, if not in person. And goodbye to everybody. Good luck for the Georgian team at our European Championship for the next steps. You made a great game yesterday, and you will have another good game in the days to come. Bye-bye. All the best to you.
Thanks to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you and bye.